Hi Mum, you do everything for everyone else. Let me help you make your life easier. Quick, short information to make you empowered and remind you why you are so important. Because if you don't know what's on the menu, how can you choose what's right for you? Hi, I'm Alina, Director of my private practice Supportive Therapy. An everyday Aussie mum trying not to lose my biscuits and my kids. As a mental health professional, I'm here to share my secrets so no other mother feels alone or powerless. Knowledge is power, and I want you to be powerful. Think of it like I'm your mindset coach through all of this. Everything is backed by science and psychology. I believe in you, and I want you to be the best version of yourself. To be happy and feel in control, you need to be mentally strong. Hello everyone, welcome to Mentally Strong Mums. This one is a very special one. I actually see it a lot of the time within my sessions with my clients and especially with my couples, and how people that don't realize that they're neurodiverse or they fall under the neurodiverse umbrella and how it actually impacts them if they've never been diagnosed or even understand what it is, and how it actually impacts you, your relationship, the way that you resolve conflict, the way that you actually complete tasks, sometimes even just sitting down, because I have this constant need to be able to be busy, right? So in this episode, I want to give a quick little understanding of the neurodiverse umbrella, what's included in it, potential evidence or examples that if these are within myself or my partner or even my children, then understanding what the potential next steps are. So it's definitely becoming more of a prominent conversation within society. You can see it all over TikTok, ADD, ADHD, but it doesn't actually elaborate into understanding how it actually impacts everything, okay? So we're going to unpack what it really means, explore the various diagnoses that are included under this umbrella, and discuss then how these traits can manifest both in yourself and in your children. So whether you're curious about your own behaviours or looking to understand your child better, this episode definitely is for you. So understanding neurodiversity. Neurodiversity is a term that highlights the natural variations in the human brain and also the nervous system. So nervous system is huge. It recognizes that there is no one size fits all when it comes to neurological functioning. And it's difficult because people just think, oh, well, I've got ADD and I'm diagnosed with this. But because it's different from someone else who has ADD, then it almost diminishes how I feel about me trying to seek answers because it's not the same. And that's huge because we're all unique and we're all individual. We all come from different backgrounds. So even though we might be neurodiverse, it's never going to be a cookie cutter, two are the same, right? So instead of viewing conditions like autism, ADD, and dyslexia as deficits or bad things, neurodiversity encourages us to see these traits as part of the diverse tapestry of the human experience. And I fall under this as well. And even if you Google all the famous people that are dyslexics, such as Richard Branson, and how they were able to actually harness this and how their brain is different, and without being neurodiverse, they wouldn't be where they are today. And they actually then see that as a positive as opposed to shame and embarrassment about it or feeling like I'm defective or faulty in some way. So especially understanding this perspective not only fosters acceptance within yourself, normalizing it, but also emphasizes that neurodiverse individuals often possess unique strengths such as creativity, problem solving, in different ways of thinking that actually lead to innovation and progress. So if you think going to school, but because if you are neurodiverse, you weren't able to do everything the way that everyone else did or read the way that everyone else did write backwards, can't read time. That's me. I have a huge problem with clocks. Because especially if you were diagnosed, you then feel like there's something wrong with me. And in terms of you being able to conform, you will then find unique ways of processing or figuring things out, which then, because of this process, you think differently to other people because you are forced to, which means then you actually are more creative. You can think on your feet, you can figure things out and see new perspectives than people without neurodiverse can, okay? So a really interesting, easy term, because we think in pictures. If you think of an umbrella, and when you think of umbrella, if you have one condition of neurodiverse, you're pretty much going to have a little bit of everything, okay? So that's the way that it works. Everything is on a scale. So you might be on a scale, if you pictured a long line as a scale with a 0 at the beginning and a 10 at the end. So with dyslexia, you might be on the scale of 8, because that's pretty significant. With dyscalculia, you'll be on a scale of about 5, which is it impacts me, but I can still manage. You might also be on the scale of autism, but it might only be about a 2 or a 3 out of 10. And that's how we need to think of all of this, that can help us understand ourselves better and why we do the things that we do, as opposed to being the absolute terms. So those absolute terms are, I have full-blown ADD or ADHD, and that means you're a 10 out of 10. Instead of assuming that everyone's like that, everything's on a scale, okay? So understanding the neurodiverse umbrella. So some of the common diagnoses are autism. They call that autism spectrum disorder, which is ASD. So this could be on the spectrum, so on a scale. So you might even just be a 2 or a 3 out of 10, but I like to wear the same clothes every day. I feel uncomfortable looking at people directly in the eye, all of the stuff. So autism is characterized by differences in social communication and sometimes repetitive behaviors. So it's called a spectrum because it encompasses a wide range of experiences and abilities. So some individuals might be nonverbal, which then you think that's the extreme version of the scale on the 10, while others may excel in verbal communication. So that will be about the 2 or the 3. Understanding autism can also help you see the world through your child's eyes, fostering empathy and connection. So that's number 1. Number 2, which is attention deficit ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So there's 3 different types of this. So ADD, which is attention deficit disorder, which primarily girls don't get diagnosed in, but girls have because they're not hyperactive, but they internalize everything, overthink everything, panic all the time, sometimes to the point where they're frozen, but their whole inside is like this swirling vortex. And sometimes with ADD, it can be difficult to concentrate and be present. You're in your head more often than not. And ADD, sometimes you can then mask very, very well. So you don't actually get diagnosed until, never, or late adults, because you realize it's enough now. ADHD, which is patterns of inattention, hyperactive, impulse. So you've got extremely impulsive or lack of impulse control. Many people with ADHD are incredibly creative and always think outside the box, even if they struggle with traditional organizational tasks. So even though I might not do the traditional quote unquote normal things, you've been able to figure out different ways of doing it so that at least you can kind of conform to everything. So And then the third one is a combination of ADD and ADHD. So you can be in it, you can internalize everything with ADD and mask very well that people don't know, but it's difficult because then you might be also have the ADHD, that hyperactivity, can't sit still, everything. I can't ever complete a task unless it's on the due date, and it doesn't matter what you do or how much money you. And then especially for mothers, it's that comparisonitis. Why can't I figure these things out or get these things done? So if this is you and you want to learn a bit more, have a look at executive functioning and how it actually impacts you. Actually, I might talk about executive functioning in a moment. So dyslexia, number 3, dyslexia primarily impacts and affects reading and language processing. So individuals with dyslexia often have strong verbal skills, but struggle with decoding written words. And there's 2 different types of dyslexia where when you read something, it goes in correct in through your eyes, but then it kind of gets muddled up in your brain and then comes out through your eyes a bit muddled up. So if you are alert, well rested, you don't generally get impacted a lot with dyslexia. But if you are often tired and fatigued, that's when dyslexia can impact you. And then the second type of dyslexia is it goes in through the eyes wrong, and then it gets muddled up in the brain wrong. So then you're combating 2 different things because you can't actually win, which is really difficult then too, because that kind is a lot more difficult because it goes in wrong and gets muddled up wrong, where the other version, it can go in right or wrong. But yeah, so that's also something to have a look at to be able to help understand as well. Dyscalculia, while dyslexia is really quite common and we've heard of dyslexia, dyscalculia we haven't. So dyscalculia involves difficulties with numbers, arithmetic, and math-related tasks. So individuals with dyscalculia might excel in areas that require spatial reasoning or logic. So spatial reasoning, sometimes that's the ability to read maps. And it can be a lot easier for some people and not. There's another one called dyspraxia. It's developmental coordination disorder, dyspraxia. I find that word very hard to say. And dyspraxia often affects motor skills development and coordination. So children with dyspraxia struggle with physical tasks, but often exhibit strengths in other cognitive areas. Cognitive means thinking. So understanding this can help you find alternate ways for your child to engage, because if they don't do things the traditional way, you've got to find an alternative for do it. Number 6 is Tourette's. We've heard it in, those movies, the comedies, and then they actually take the piss out of people with Tourette's. But there was also a study recently that children who watch a large volume of TikTok videos and a certain kind of TikTok videos actually start to develop Tourette's because of that. So even though they might be neurodiverse and they might not have it growing up, sometimes if you're exposed to things that then activate you or trigger you, such as certain things on TikTok, this is what the evidence said. So this neurological condition involves involuntary movements and vocalizations known as tics. So sometimes people with autism, they have little tics when they get nervous, when they get anxious, and sometimes, if you know what that looks like, it can be extremely involuntary and frustrating because I don't have control over my own body. So understanding to be able to have patience and support and empathy and nurturing, as opposed to saying, stop doing that, because that obviously makes things more anxious. Another one is OCD, obsessive compulsive. That then is actually anxiety as well. But when you are under the neurodiverse umbrella, remember everything's on a bit of a scale. So you might have a little bit of everything. Some might be a 1 or a 2 out of 10. Some might be an 8. Okay. So while OCD is often viewed as an anxiety disorder, OCD can also be considered in the neurodiverse framework because it's categorized by intrusive thoughts. So intrusive thoughts are you're walking down the street, next thing you know, there's this awful thought that just pops into your head saying that you want to fall over and scrape your knee or something, right? It's just intrusive. It comes out of nowhere and you're like, whoa, okay? It can also be compulsive behaviors. So understanding OCD from a neurodiverse perspective can also help families approach the condition with compassion and insight. So all of these, a lot of the time, are impacted by your executive functioning. So if you tap your forehead is where your frontal lobe is, which is your higher thinking, which lives your executive functioning. And so all of the neurodiverse stuff is impacted. So impulse control to help children think before they act, that's impacted negatively. Emotional control, so it impacts the emotional control that helps your child keep their feelings in check. So sometimes that's why they have the big feelings, the big emotions, the big tantrums, all the stuff, because it impacts their emotional control, which is part of executive functioning. Flexible thinking. So good mental health is represented by flexible thinking. Flexible thinking allows your child to adjust to the unexpected. Negative mental health is absolute, concrete, inflexible thinking. No, this is how it is. No, I'm not doing it. No, this is it, right? Working memory. Working memory helps your child keep information in mind. So it's having those can you do this for me? Go and do this. But because they can't do it because it's impacted by their executive functioning and their working memory, they have no idea what you just said because they can't retain it. I just told you to go clean your room. No, you didn't. Yes, I did. Right? Self-monitoring. Self-monitoring allows your child to evaluate how they're doing. So that's also being self-aware, understanding where you are in the world. Planning and prioritizing. So planning and prioritizing to help decide a goal, to plan it and meet it. Task initiation, to be able to take action and begin. That's impacted. That's why everything gets done at the last minute, as well as organization. So organization is also negatively impacted, and that's why they can't keep track of things physically and mentally. And so even with all of this stuff under the neurodiverse umbrella, it impacts so much. It's not just ADD or ADHD. And the things I haven't mentioned are sensory processing disorder. They also feel like there's been some evidence that Down syndrome is a part of this, epilepsy, bipolar, HPD, NPD, BPD. I'm not too sure about all of those, but that's why it's good to keep an open mind, be very flexible about the potential. And if you are neurodiverse, what does that mean to you? How does that impact your executive functioning for you to function like every other cookie cutter? Why everyday tasks are actually harder for you. And if you haven't been able to develop skills and strategies to manage, it can feel so overwhelming. Why as well sometimes addictive behaviors or addictions are actually more common with neurodiverse people, and that's because of that impulse control, all of that kind of stuff. And so if you are neurodiverse, depending on how extreme and on the scale, you have to work a lot harder and you've got to do the research. And if you recognize this within yourself, or even if you don't recognize this within yourself, but you're recognizing this in your partner and in your child, they can be really quite defensive because their entire life have always been behind the 8 ball. And so then as a coping mechanism and a protective skill, they're always defensive, okay? There's an amazing book by Dr. Gabor Mate called Scattered Minds, And it helps explain ADD, being defensive, feeling like I can't trust myself or my body, because even when I know that it's 3 o'clock, it's actually not, it's 6. And I can't trust myself. So especially understanding nature versus nurture, as we explore these different diagnoses, it's important and essential to consider the nature versus nurture debate. So it's not determined by genetics, okay? So even if you grew up, well, I might actually have another whole episode about dissociating and how that then flows into neurodiverse development. So it doesn't actually, a lot of the time, not just genetic, it can also be developed by environmental factors, your emotional safety as a child growing up, what you were allowed to do. So understanding that a supportive environment can enhance a child's neurodiverse strength, but a negative environment will exacerbate challenges and make everything worse. So that's extremely important to understand for yourself and where you sit on the scale, as well as if your children have that, you have to work very hard at regulating yourself and managing yourself so then you don't exacerbate your children, but you want to be able to embrace it. You also need to understand, if you're doing research, it needs to be evidence-based. So evidence-based research shows that neurodiverse individuals bring a unique perspective that contributes positive to society in meaningful ways. So never feel shameful or embarrassed about this potential diagnosis for you, because you're actually making a beautiful, positive difference to the world. So with your parental perspective, whether it's you or your partner, you need to look from the bigger perspective. Get your head out of the sand. I know it's uncomfortable and difficult, but if you can be flexible and open and curious about yourself, being able to understand your own behaviors and how they might relate to those of your children. So some traits might be hereditary, some might be societal or environmental, but you need to then understand how to be able to foster that in a way that is beautiful and accepting and nurturing. So understanding it was a lot. You might have to listen to this again or write notes, because it's huge. Halfway through, because if it's triggering, you will dissociate, which means you zone out, which means it's hitting a nerve, which means you need to listen to it again, okay? So understanding the neurodiverse umbrella, understanding how nature versus nurture impacts it. It can exacerbate it or it can support it. And it's always remembering that we need to celebrate our differences. And the society we live in sometimes doesn't do that. So how can you do that in the home? Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Mentally Strong Mums about neurodiversity. I know it can be difficult if you are on this journey or if you are realizing things for the first time. I hope you feel empowered and informed, and then continue to support your family's mental health and well-being. Until next time, stay strong mentally, Mum. Thanks for joining me. Bye. If you are hearing this message, you've listened to the entire episode, and for that, I want to thank you for your support. It takes me hours to research and create this for you, so I genuinely hope you enjoyed it and felt more mentally strong. If you have any suggestions or improvements, let me know, because I'm always open for criticisms. If you have found my information useful, please leave a review and subscribe. So by leaving a review, it's a value exchange. It's good karma. I value your support just as much as you value my free information. So find me on Instagram and Facebook by searching Mentally Strong Mums, and I'm Aussie, so we're spelled M-U-M. And then you can find heaps of resources on www.mentallystrongmums.com. And this podcast is for you. So let me know what topics you would like to see covered in future episodes. And if yourself is a professional that is working with mums and would like to be a guest to help other mums be mentally strong, I would love to support you. So message me on Instagram on Mentally Strong Mums, M-U-M-S, all one word. Thank you so much for your time. Have a wonderful day, you beautiful mum.